My name is Leon Wolff, and along with Luke Nottage and formerly Kent Anderson, I'm one of the original co-founders of ANGEL, the Australian Network for Japanese Law. It began when we all started in our new positions. I had moved to Sydney at UNSW, Kent had joined ANU, and Luke was a senior lecturer at Sydney University. And we just decided that given that our area is a niche area, Japanese law and Japanese law and society in particular, that it would be a good idea to sort of join resources rather than sort of compete for very limited resources when it came to research funding, and collaborate as far as possible given institutional rivalries in terms of teaching. My work is focused on the intersection between social justice and commercial law. So I look at corporate governance, but with a view to how it affects employment relations. I look at gender and sexual harassment. What we're going to discuss today, popular culture, in terms of what does that say, not only the industry, but also the products that emerge from the Japan's popular culture industry. What does that say about the changing nature of Japanese capitalism, as well as the images that it has of laws? Given that the focus is on television at the height of interest in law, which coincided with the 2001 law reform project, the justice system reforms. So in fact, the interest in Japanese law as a theme in television has declined somewhat. So it means that I do have a distinct time frame within which to sort of offer an analysis. And I suppose my starting point, both in terms of my research community and to the students, is just with that initial question, does law matter? I mean, one of the most well-trotted out statements is the Japanese do not sue as much as anywhere else. And it's true, they don't. And even less compared to Asian neighbours. Now, that second fact means that the common explanation for that culture begins to experience some problems, because there are other neighbouring countries with similar cultural outlooks where litigation rates are sometimes 2 or even 3 times higher. So the comparative law community or expert community has largely accepted that law does matter. And that now the question is, how does it matter? And that's where I use popular culture as a way of seeing how do ordinary people consume this material, or how did the demand for it led the entertainment industry to sort of focus more on these types of law-related stories, and to try and use different analytical techniques, from narrative analysis to semiotics. To my most recent piece was on the study of humour, to understand, what is really a cultural studies type project, a humanities style project, but to translate that into social scientific terms. That is, what meaning does law have in Japanese society? Humour is also a storytelling technique, and the argument that I make, I actually draw from Lawrence Freedman, a famous law and society scholar, who said if you want to, you can never directly measure people's attitudes. So the best you can do is sort of excavate evidence for that. And he said popular culture is a rich source of evidence from which you can see that if people are consuming entertainment about this particular area, it shows that they've got an interest in it, and that the entertainment industry is responding to that type of demand. So with humour comes certain sort of rhetorical or thematic devices. So for example, there is a very high rated series, actually had a 2-season run, called Legal High. The protagonist there was a very eccentric lawyer, always winning, sort of quite greedy, and the courtroom scenes were, bordered on the bizarre, a bit like Ally McBeal or Boston Legal. Both of those shows sort of reflecting on, first of all, gender and sex and relationships, and the latter on US politics at the time. And this Legal High was sort of showing, I suppose, the power of law, especially when it dealt with inequality or social justice, because with the protagonist was the main female sidekick, and she was played her character more straight, and she was really providing for the audience a commentator that the law and sense of justice was important, as much as the main male protagonist was setting things up for ridicule. But at the same time, the point of the humour was to show that, law does have its limits. Sometimes it is ridiculous to bring a claim to court, and there are better ways of solving social situations. So from that, I was able to extrapolate sort of like an emotional attitude in Japan, such that there is an interest in law, and it's seen as valid when there's unequal power relationships or when there's a social injustice that's manifested. But at the same time, there's ambivalence about the law as the appropriate mechanism when dealing with sort of daily, with your neighbour or with your friends or with your broader community, that law is probably not the best way of solving those types of conflicts. In terms of popular culture, I think the law as a theme is going to decline. That was captured the imagination for a long time. Mind you, it will still play as a theme, because one element of dramas is because it is produced and largely consumed by women. Women are the main heroine characters, and given inequality in the workplace and career opportunities, often these dramas pitch their heroines in sort of more unusual occupations. There was one very popular drama called Beautiful Life, where she was like a librarian. So women as lawyers, there's been series about, divorce lawyers or as paralegals or as prosecutors. That will always be a device, because it's more of it's not sort of like the typical company or government department. So it'll be a more interesting way of telling stories. But as I said before, the excitement over the law reforms have now largely dissipated. It's sort of business as usual when it comes to law. So other more important themes like, the 3/11 disaster, I think COVID-19 pandemic, maybe the change in Prime Minister, all of those things will be a raw material for dramatists and writers and producers to reflect on and then convey to their audience. And so law will return to a more minor theme. The major types of dramas are your coming of age stories, your family sagas, or your workplace dramas. So law fits within the third, the workplace drama. And I think they will gradually decline as other themes capture the Japanese imagination. One thing which I'm hoping, in my current work anyway, that pop culture as an example. My other work, I've looked at gender, for example, gender in the judiciary and sexual harassment. I've also looked at lifelong employment. I'm currently writing up some work on cube culture and the way that it's used by the state to promote new rights or new duties to the community. And from that, I can see that Japanese law sort of largely reiterated key explanatory paradigms for explaining law and society. As the most popular one, especially for novices, is culture. Okay, everything is different in Japan because Japan is Japan. It has this group-oriented, harmonious culture. And culture is very visible, it's very real. Whether it quite has the explanatory effect, I think all of Angel researchers have expressed some reservations about that. Certainly that's my position. But as for counter explanations, I think we're running out of ideas. It's either institutions, it might be law and policy or power itself. It could be the inequalities, structural inequalities, and the elite manipulation of the legal system. Or, Professor Ramsay from Harvard University has written quite extensively about the Japanese are no different from everyone else. They're rational actors, and that's the phenomena that you see can simply be explained on that basis. So the departure that I'm taking is that we can also look at, when we look at a rational person also has emotions. In fact, if you do not express emotions, you're functionally brain dead, because they work at the same time, your left side of the brain, the right side of the brain. So drawing on the sort of the emotional, the feeling reasons why people choose to sue, why people choose not to, is not just a logical decision, but one that is also born, nor is it completely controlled by material factors like politics or economics or cultural factors. There could just be a human emotional desire out of anger, sense of justice, retribution. But at the same time, the rational person will regulate their emotions. So anger will be you know, it's unhealthy to have it turn into rage. So how Japanese sort of regulate their anger and then choose, is law the appropriate avenue here, or is there a better way of choosing things? And that is also linked to inequality as well. There's been a recent book published to say that mostly people are cooperative. We're social animals. We're not competitive with one another. We want to come together and we want to, you know, work as a community. So law is the last resort for probably everyone in the world, even the Americans, who are also mythologized as being hyper litigious. And sort of understanding that as a new way of looking at rights assertion, legal consciousness, engagement with litigation is something that I hope will refresh the debate and come up with new methodologies to sort of explore that as an explanatory variable.